Hello everybody, welcome to the Colour Cave. My name's Jem and I like to play with art stuff. Just colouring today is going to take place in Ivy and the Inky Butterfly by Johanna Basford. And just before we grab our pencils and get started, I want to ask you to take a moment to leave me some feedback in the comments section, or also to fill in a poll question that's going to appear in the card in this corner. I am looking for some feedback because I would like to know what type of videos you want to see when we are just colouring. I would like to know whether or not you would like to see an image coloured from start to finish over a variety of videos, or you're quite happy just to watch little snippets here and there as I go, whatever it is I'm doing. In the poll, I was asking whether you would like to see me colour different sections of the picture within one video and then perhaps go back and repeat the process. For example, in this book there are a lot of flowers that are very similar, and in this video I do colour the same flower throughout, so it's a repetitive pattern. So basically I need to know whether that absolutely bores you to tears, or whether it's something you're quite happy watching, or you'd like to see different colour combinations used within the same video. So if you could take a moment to do that, then you can grab your pencils and we'll get started. Alright, so the first thing that I'm going to do is finish off colouring the rest of these daisy-like flowers. So I have with me here Scarlet Lake PC 923. These are all Prismacolor pencils, everybody. I have my Canary Yellow, which is getting a little bit on the short side. And I have Yellowed Orange PC 1002. I have mentioned it before, this is an old Prismacolor pencil with the gold writing on it. It is far superior in terms of quality compared to the new ones, but it does lay down exactly the same colour, so just don't panic. I might as well continue on down at the bottom here. I'm going to start in this corner. Now this is something that I've probably mentioned before as well, but being left-handed I tend to work left to right so that I'm not, smudging over what I've already done. With this flower that was an exception. I just used the middle one because it was easiest at the time for the video that I was doing. So the best thing to do, if you have done this already, is to get another piece of paper and put it under your hand, especially with Prismacolor pencils because they are quite soft and they do tend to sort of smoosh about a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a little bit of tracing paper just to pop under my hand. Now you can use any type of paper. The smoother the better, though, I will say that, because obviously if the paper has a tooth and you put it down on top and you're moving it about, you're still going to get a little bit of smudge and smear. I also like tracing paper just because you can see what's going on underneath without sort of blocking everything out. Alright, so I'm just doing a very simple blend here, and I'm starting with my yellow right in at the centre there and bringing that out a little bit. When it comes to blending, sometimes I start with my darkest colour and sometimes I start with my lightest colour. It really just depends what kind of mood I'm in. But I do like to put down a light layer of each colour that I'm using in my blend to map out where, how far out each colour is going to go and how much of each colour is actually going to be on show inside of that particular item. I suppose it's just like a planning stage, really. I'm quite confident, because I've already done one of these flowers previously, I'm quite confident that I know where everything's going and how much I want to see, so that's why I'm not being particularly careful or taking a lot of time over it, because I've already done it. In today's exciting news, being a Scottish farmer and all that jazz, today our bull escaped. He has been put in with some new cows, to have a little bit of fun with. And he decided that he wasn't interested in it and he was more excited about going for a jolly round the farm. It is absolutely pouring with rain outside. Here is Jem with our wellies and our waterproofs on. No jacket, no hat, bare head, chasing a bull round the yard for about 20 minutes, trying to get him to go back in the shed. Oh, the joys. Things like this always happen, number one, when my partner is nowhere to be seen. and number 2 when the weather is absolutely atrocious. It never happens on like a nice sunny calm day. It always happens when the weather is absolutely nasty, chucking it down with rain. So yeah, that's been the extent of my excitement today. I don't think I want any more excitement after that, if I'm honest. To be fair, he isn't a bad-tempered bull. He's just big. And, you know, that's the kind of the size of animal that if he decides he's going somewhere, well, you know, you're not really going to stop him. Obviously, he couldn't find any nice girlfriends. That's why he decided to take himself off for a walk. Maybe he was away looking for better-looking ladies. I don't know. I'm just working away here, building up some layers. I want these colours to be nice and vibrant. In the last page that I'd coloured in this book, I had used very sort of delicate pastel shades, and the opposite page that I've done here is on this side is quite sort of vibrant and dark, so I wanted this to sort of mirror that, as it were, because I think if I'd used pale colours again, it would look really washed out compared to the page next door. That's my reasoning, my logic anyway. It's not something that I would normally think about, but I think just because this is a storybook, it's made me look at the pages as pairs, because obviously a lot of the joy of this book is the fact that there are lots of pictures in it. It is a children's book, and everybody likes things that are aesthetically pleasing, but a lot of younger children will be looking more at the pictures, perhaps if, you know, mum or dad were to read to them. So that's something that I did think about a lot more with this book, that I've never given any thought to with any of my other colouring books, which is quite strange, but kind of nice at the same time. I don't necessarily have to have all the pages, you know, sort of matchy together, but I think just to help with the cohesion of the story as well. Things like, and this is long debated since this book came out, people have debated whether or not the likes of the recurring characters, so Ivy and House Mouse and so on, whether or not to colour them the same throughout the entire book or whether to change it up a little bit. And I think that purely depends on what type of person you are. I am a person that is obsessed with regimented order, you know, things in a logical sequence, etc, etc. I could not colour in the book and have Ivy's dress 6 different colours throughout the book. That would drive me absolutely nuts. So that is definitely something that I have thought about, and I have continuity throughout my copy of Ivy and the Inky Butterfly, because I just couldn't have it any other way. I wouldn't like it. I'd want to go back and change it if I'd done that. But I have to say, utmost respect to those who are able to change it up and really, you know, make it as, you know, colourful and as much variety in it as possible, because it's something I just can't do. So respect to you guys for that. If you've got that sort of free-spirited notion, I am incredibly jealous. But I just like everything in its place and everything in a sensible order, so I couldn't have a storybook that was like that. And I do, before I start a page, I do read, obviously I've read the story anyway, but I do read the paragraph that goes with the page to see if it influences how I'm going to colour the picture. Which completely contradicts this page entirely, because these flowers are supposed to be daisies. However, you know, some things you just got to let it go. Bring this in round. I did notice quite an interesting conversation about this book the other day, and somebody was telling me that the paper in the US published version versus the paper in the UK publication is very, very different indeed, and a lot of people don't like the paper in the US version. So you have to tell me, guys. Obviously I have the UK version, which is published by Virgin Books, and the paper is lovely. It really is. I love the paper in this book. If you have the US version, or even if you have both, please leave a comment and tell me about it, and tell me what you think about the paper in the other one, because I've never seen it and I'm quite curious. The paper in the UK one, it is quite smooth. It takes most pencils though. All right, there we go. One little flower. On to the next one. I think what I'm going to do is I am going to work my way round and just get all these daisy type flowers done first, and then I'll go back and start on another type of flower and do all of them, and so on and so forth, so you get the idea. I'm just doing what I did with the last one here, and I'm kind of mapping out where I want the transition and the amount of each colour, just to give me a rough idea of where I need to be blending. Now, there's nothing to say that you have to do this, it's just the way that I do things. It's my preferred method. If you try it out and it works for you, then great. I'm just going to sneak a tiny little bit of red in here because this one's covered by the bluebell. You're just going to see the red creeping into the orange. Okay, I'm happy enough with that. So just going round the outside, and I am using heavy pressure here just to get my colour started around this outside edge, and then I can start to release the pressure as I work in towards where my yellowed orange is going to meet this Scarlet Lake pencil. So I'll lighten up a little bit now. Just start working my way in. As you saw with the last one, I do go back and forth quite a lot, so it's easier to stick to these light layers and then just build them up gradually. It's funny because when you look at it now, it just looks like a big old mess and you think, oh, how is this ever going to fix itself? I remember Erin over at Simple Art for Adults, she did say at one point that every picture goes through an ugly stage. I would say that this flower is at the ugly stage right now. And when it gets like that, don't panic, just keep trucking. You will get there. I know so many people that have had multiple copies of a colouring book because they have been unhappy with the results that they've yielded the first time they've gone to colour a page, and they've hated it so much that they've gone and restarted it in another book. I think that's insane. That's one thing that I am fiercely proud of. I have pictures that are a disaster. I mean, pictures that I made mistakes in, especially when I was learning to colour properly. I'm proud of them because I persevered, I kept going, but also I learned from those pictures, you know. When you look, there is one book in particular, the first adult colouring book that I ever got was Enchanted Forest, and it is by Johanna Basford, and it is the book that I am working front to back in, and I'm determined to finish it. And if you look, I'm probably further than 2/3 of the way through it now, but if you flip through from the very beginning, you can actually see the improvement in my colouring as it goes along. So in a way, the book tells a story, but it's my story, and I think that's something that's, you know, that's really nice to have. It's something, you know, it's like a physical manifestation of how much your skills have improved. So although there are pictures that I greatly dislike because I felt I could have done things differently, or, you know, at this stage I would have used a different technique or something like that, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing to be ashamed of, and I would never ever restart a page. Part of working with art materials and creative processes in general is learning to work with an initial idea. Learn to develop it and let it grow, let it breed. And okay, you might not have something that's, you know, going to be an absolute masterpiece every single time, but if that was the case, then there would be so many successful artists in the world. You know, if you could reproduce a perfect work of art every single time, then there would be no variation and there would be no challenge in it either. So, you know, I say that if you have a picture that's maybe not gone according to plan, or you're not entirely happy with it, we all have them, don't scrap an entire colouring book just because of it, because that's going to become a really expensive hobby. Try and work with it, try and fix it, do the best you can with it, and keep it there as a reminder that you're never going to do that again. Learn from your mistakes and utilise what's there. Figure out what it is that you've done wrong or you don't like about it, and then resolve never to do it again, and find another avenue or a contingency or a different method for when you come across a similar situation. You know, perhaps you come across something, you know, like I don't know, a similar background, or, you know, something like that in another book. Remember it and look back on your other one, compare and say, right, okay, I don't want to do that again. It's all about learning, and we all improve all the time. There's another little one done. Oh, look at this little diddly one. Okay, so I can do these two side by side. This must be incredibly boring. I don't know how you guys want to watch this. I'm just doing the same thing over and over and over. The point in making these videos is so that people will watch them. So any input or feedback, you know, towards that process would be really helpful to me right now. Oh, my phone's going crazy. I feel like I don't want to put too much red in this one just because it is a much smaller flower. I feel as if the red might kind of overpower the rest of it, so I'm going to keep that to a minimum round the outside. I need to sharpen. Might as well do the other ones while I'm here. Okay, that's better. When I sharpen a Prismacolor, I'm always waiting for that first little snap, you know, the very tip of the point to come off. Sometimes I play a game with myself and try to see how much colouring I can get done before it snaps, and it usually lasts about 1/4 of a second. It's not a very good game. I feel as if I'm really restricted here. Trying to squeeze in the red. Okay, that looks marginally better. Back to my orange. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull the red down with the orange towards the yellow. Again, just because it's quite a confined space. It's funny how in some books I don't feel that, you know, sort of constriction at all. I mean, when you think about the likes of Kirby Rosanna's books, there are so many like teeny weeny little fiddly details in some of his pictures, and yet they don't seem to bother me at all. But when I'm doing something that's quite uniform, like petals on a flower, I seem to feel really restricted, and as if I'm trying to like squeeze the colours in. As you know, it's like, oh, I'm going to get all this in here. It's funny that. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's just because it is the uniformity of it. You know, you want it to be the same most of the way around. Okay, I'm back with my yellow now, and I'm going to just sort of smoosh this all in. This is the joy of Prismacolors. They're very smooshy, squishy, soft. They're fabulous for this. I would recommend that if you are learning to blend, or you're maybe just not an overly confident blender, Prismacolors are a great way to go. Just because of the softness of them, they do blend really, really easily, and it's a great way to learn, or you know, to try and improve your blending before using a harder pencil. So I actually, like a lot of other people, funnily enough, when I first got the Prismacolors, I didn't really like them. I had been used to Crayola pencils, which are pretty hard, and I had learned to do the minimal blending that you can do with Crayola pencils, and changing to the Prismacolors, I was just like, what kind of crazy hell is this? and I really didn't like them to begin with, and it did take a fair bit of getting used to. And I grew to like them, but again, I mean, using my Prismacolors, I used them more in drawings rather than adult colouring, and they were fine for, it was different using them for sketching and things like that, but I didn't use them a lot for colouring in, and I had a very limited palette of them to begin with as well, just simply because I was using them for sketching. When it came to colouring in with them, I was like, oh, okay, I just want to go back to my Crayolas. But over time, we've kind of become friends, sort of. We would be better friends if they were better quality. It kind of irks me a little bit now that they are considered artists' quality pencils, because they're really not of the standard that they used to be. And I think, though, to be fair, that is reflected in the price now, particularly if you are in the States. You can pick up Prismacolors dirt cheap compared to what they used to be, you know, what they used to cost. They are so cheap now. But see, unfortunately, that is reflected in the quality of the pencils now, which is a shame, really. And I don't even, you know, because everyone always says, oh, the two pencils are Prismacolors and Polychromos, and I don't think that they're even in the same league as Polychromos. Now, to be fair, they are completely different pencils. You know, they're like chalk and cheese in terms of the characteristics of them, but in terms of being artist grade pencils, I don't think the Prismacolors are a patch on the Polychromos. I have had, out of a set of 120 Polychromos pencils, and having used them for, I don't know, maybe a year, I have had one lead snap on me. That's it. The rest of the time I've had to sharpen my Polychromos is because the point was blunt on them, and not because of breakages. Now again, naturally that is going to happen because they are harder pencils, but just the build quality, the construction of the pencil is just so much harder. And they feel, I don't know, because maybe it's because they're slightly, the barrel is slightly bigger, you know, the diameter of the barrel's bigger. I don't know whether that has something to do with it as well, but they do feel so much more substantial when you pick one up in your hand. They're a bit heavier, they're a bit thicker, and you just think, oh, this is a pencil. Whereas I don't get that with the Prismacolors at all. On the flip side of it though, they are quite cheap to replace open stock, the Prismacolors. It's probably just as well because you go through them like water. So, you know, there's pros and cons for everything, but unfortunately, if you live outside of the US, then you will pay dearly for Prismacolor pencils, and it's actually at the point where you begin to wonder whether or not it is worth the money. I had a conversation with someone in Australia, and I thought they were expensive in the UK. Oh my goodness, they are so expensive in Australia. And again, they're being shipped quite a large distance, and obviously all that rattling about in transit doesn't do anything for the breakage issues that people have been experiencing. So not only are our lovely Australian counterparts paying an absolutely exorbitant amount of money for them, they're having to suffer with more breakage problems than perhaps someone in the US might have to deal with. It's really frustrating for a lot of people. I have found a reliable seller of open stock, in fact 2 reliable sellers of open stock, and I have had very few issues with breakages buying those open stock pencils. Now what I shall do is, if you are lucky enough to be in the UK, I shall leave links to those shops down in the description underneath the video if you would like to go and have a look at their shops. They are both independent small businesses, and it's something that I like to support, and I have been buying pencils from these two I want to say companies, from these 2 people for probably a year or so now, and the customer service I always find with smaller companies is really good. Not only that, it's just nice to support smaller businesses. So the first one is Rainbow Fine Arts Pencils, and that is run by a man called Peter. The second is the Coloured Pencil Shop, and the lady's name who runs that is Emma. They don't only stock Prismacolors, they do have other pencils open stock as well. They may not be the cheapest in terms of buying open stock, but they are very reasonably priced, and as I say, the customer service from both of them has been exceptional for me, and I am happy to continue to give them my money. So yeah, I have been buying a lot of greens open stock because, as I said, I'm working front to back in Enchanted Forest, and naturally that requires quite a lot of green because there are a lot of leaves. And I think I'm on my third or fourth Prussian green. Third Prussian green. I did have severe breakage issues with my second one, and I basically chewed through half a pencil just trying to get a point on it, so I was really annoyed about that. So when I bought them open stock, I bought 4 just in case it was a going to be a recurring problem, and that was from one of the aforementioned online shops. I can't remember which one now off the top of my head, and touch wood, I have had no further issues, which is real nice. Alright then, there's another one. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit and we can see all the flowers that we've done so far. There we go, so it's starting to look quite pretty now. That looks good. So as I was saying earlier about the sort of smudgy situation, I'm going to sort of work around in an anti-clockwise direction here. So I'm going to go up to the top and I'll work my way around the text in the middle. So eventually we'll end up back down in the bottom left corner. Now you can see up here that this top corner of my book's looking pretty grubby. This book doesn't go anywhere, I don't take it anywhere, and it's just picking up little bits of pencil dust and shavings from other pages that I've coloured and that sort of thing. I'm just going to give this a quick rub here to see if I can take some of it off. I might be able to get rid of some of it. I'll never be able to get rid of all of it, but I wouldn't expect to. Here's my little there it is there. Yeah, that's kind of marginally better in that corner. It's one of those things I don't worry about. When you do art, you're going to make a mess. It's not going to impact the finished product of my picture, so it's one of those things I've just learned to let go of, because again, I am quite I like everything to be right. But I have come to realise that if you want to be creative, it's back to the old saying, if you want to make an omelette, you've got to break a few eggs. There, that looks a little bit better. I've got this bit over here. Okay, I think that's about as good as it's going to get. Onward with the canary yellow. In between flowers, I have been back out to check on our bull just in case he's decided to take himself off again. I am pleased to report that he has remained in the shed and he now seems to be taking an interest in his lady friends. So everybody's happy. Oh my. I had visions of putting my boots on and going back out and having to start all over again with the running around the yard. So I was very pleased to find him wandering about in amongst the girls. To be fair as well, the girls seem just as interested in him as he does in them. So that's a good sign. Bulls really do get a bad reputation. I feel sorry for them sometimes. As with all large animals, you do have to be careful around them because their tempers can turn very quickly. But they really aren't any different to cows. There's only one thing worse than a bull that's in a temper, and that is a cow with a calf who decides that she is going to protect it. You will come to much more harm that way 9 times out of 10 than you will from a bull. When we are choosing our bulls, we specifically pick ones with slightly gentler natures, and we try and avoid, again, you know, breeding lines that have shown sort of bad-tempered animals in general, because it is a very dangerous profession to work in. I think agriculture and construction are the two occupations where you're most likely to get injured or killed at work. The figures for this have gone down in the farming world over the years because of the advent of farm machinery. Many moons ago, you know, everything was done with like horses and carts or oxen, that kind of thing, whereas a lot of the processes are done by attachments that go into tractors and things like that. So in terms of injury and death, you know, that figure has dropped considerably. But in terms of working with animals, there really is no other way to work with them other than face to face, hand to hand. 9 times out of 10 it is just the sheer size and weight of the creatures rather than them being bad tempered or, you know, anything like that. Most accidents occur because of the size of the animal. We get a lot of crushed hands or crushed bodies or squashed feet, you know, you get stood on. Getting kicked, that's another favourite as well. A cow will never bite you. It's the back end you've got to worry about. Yeah, I've been kicked a couple of times. Generally, though, they're very nice animals to work with, and they are my favourite to work with. I like working with pigs as well because they're very clever. But pigs can give you a very nasty bite, and if a pig bites you, wowee, you'll know about it. But I like cows because they're, generally speaking, they're quite nice tempered. They're quite gentle natured animals, and they're naturally a very curious animal, and it's my favourite thing about them, because if you even walk anywhere near the shed, all the heads pop up and they're all looking to see what you are or who you are or what you're going to do, and it's just very, very nice, and they're quite easy to tame down as well. So yeah, cows are my favourite. I like them. But I did, many moons ago, when I was a farm labourer, when I was a student, when I was doing my degree, I went and worked part-time on a friend's farm. Now, I'd known the gentleman for years, and I went to do a bit of work for him. And we were grooming cattle. Some of the longer haired varieties can get quite dirty, especially with the Scottish weather. So we were grooming some of the cattle, and some of them really like it when you comb under their bellies. I suppose it's a bit like getting a tickle or a scratch, and some of them not so much, so you've got to be careful. Some of them really don't like it. And I had a male who had been castrated, so he wasn't a bull, and he stood really, really quietly, and I brushed his head and his tail and his legs and everything. He was fine. And I started to brush under his belly. It's a special position that you stand in so that you're like least likely to get injured. And I was just working my way down under his belly, and all of a sudden he just lashed out with his back foot, but he caught me in the temple. So he sent me flying, and I hit the back of my head off of a kind of low breeze block wall, and it knocked me out. And the next thing I remember was like someone like pulling at my shoulder and my sleeve, and I was trying to shrug them off, and I was like, leave me alone, I've just been kicked. And my boss is going, I need you to get you out from under here because he's going to stand on you. And I couldn't get up. So I didn't, I had 2 knocks to the head. I wasn't bleeding or anything, but I had to go to hospital because I'd been kicked in the temple, and obviously because I was unconscious. And after I had no lasting injuries, I was fine. I had to take the rest of the day off work and go and lie down. I had a pretty sore head after that. But yeah, that was, I think that's probably the most frightening injury I've had, just from the point of view of I didn't realise that I was still on the ground, and I didn't realise I'd been knocked out. And I mean, I could have been, again, not because the animal was bad tempered, he obviously didn't like me brushing his belly, but I could have been trod on or stood on or whatever, and I had no idea that that was happening. Yeah, working with cattle's fun. I really enjoy it. The other bad accident that I've had, and it is the only other one in all the years that I've been, you know, doing this kind of thing. And again, it was actually a really silly accident. I have a bull called Tam, as in the Scottish term for Tom. And Tam was the biggest, softest, cuddliest bull I have ever had in my entire life. We used to, when he was snoozing in the afternoon, you could go up to him with one of these big yard brushes, you know, with the great big stiff bristles on them, and you could rub it along his back, and he would shut his eyes and he would start sort of like wriggling about, a bit like Baloo the bear in Jungle Book, you know, and he really, really liked it. And he was so soft and so nice. The problem with that is, though, when you have an animal that weighs 1.5 tons and he has no fear or depth or space perception, it doesn't take much for you to get shoved out the road, and he didn't even realise he was doing it. 9 times out of 10 he didn't even realise you were there. I had been feeding him and some of the girls. The girls had pushed in, so Tam had come in behind me because he saw me with the bag of food and he thought, oh, she's going to feed me, and he'd followed me up to the trough and he'd started to eat out the trough at the right hand side where I'd put the feed down. And as I was working my way along, all the cows came rushing in behind him and shoved him over because they were wanting in for food. So of course Tam kind of like, he staggered sidewards, but in the process of doing that, he stood on the outside of my foot. He had no idea he was standing on my foot because he was just munching away doing his thing. And I was stood there and I could not move him. I was like beating him on the back, going, Tam, get off my foot, get off my foot, you're crushing my foot, you're crushing my foot. And he just looked round at me and he's chewing away. If I could have cut off my foot to get away from him, I would have, but I couldn't move. And of course I couldn't even pull my foot out from under him because he was so big and so heavy. So that went on. It felt as if it went on for about 3 days, but eventually he lifted his foot. And the minute he lifted his hoof up off of my foot, I could feel my foot pressing against the side of my Wellington boot, so I knew that instantly that it had started to swell up, and I thought, oh no, what am I going to do here? So I managed to hop out of the yard that the cows were in into the side, and at that point my friend came round the corner and he was like, are you all right? You're really white. And I was like, I need to get this boot off because my foot is swelling up, and if I leave it any longer I'm not going to be able to get it off and I'm going to have to cut it off. And he said, what happened? So I explained to him. And I'm sat on a brick wall and my friend had both his feet again, like bracing himself against the brick wall, trying to pull this welly off, and it would not come off. And of course, by this point, my foot was sore and I was screaming blue murder. Eventually, he pulled it off, went flying backwards, and I had an incredibly misshapen foot. I didn't even need to take my sock off. We both looked at it and he said to me, I think we better go to the hospital. I said, yeah, I think we better had do. So I tried to walk on it. I kind of limped to the car, but that wasn't happening either. So it turns out the upshot of it was, after a couple of hours in accident and emergency, I was had broken the outside bone in my foot. But what had happened was, just because of the sheer weight of him, he'd actually splayed all the bones in my foot flat. You know, like if you would go like this with your hand and spread it out. He'd basically done that to my foot, so all my bones were in the wrong place, although they weren't broken, and it was just the sheer weight, you know, pressing down through his leg and into his foot, and well, essentially onto my foot. So that was a couple of weeks on crutches. And but when you break a bone in your foot, I don't know if any of you have ever done that, they don't put you in plaster. There's no point in it because it doesn't set properly, just because it's an awkward position, so you're just kind of left to get on with it. I had one of those big kind of moon boot things to put on, but that was more to cushion and support the rest of my foot rather than the bone that was broken. But yeah, crutches are not fun. I didn't enjoy that at all, and of course I wasn't happy because I couldn't go to work. So yeah, that's the story of Tam and I, and how he squashed my foot. But those are the two worst injuries that I've had, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. Oh no, I tell a lie actually. I've got a worse one than that. I injected myself with a vaccine that's meant for cattle. And without getting too technical, basically the way that cow bodies break down vaccines is different to the way that humans do it. So you can't use a human vaccine on a cow and vice versa. And I was injecting a calf. We were giving them a vaccination against pneumonia. And as I was about to put the needle in, the calf moved, jumped, and I poked myself in the finger with it. And injected myself with about 5 millilitres of vaccine. And the first thing, when you read the labels that come in the medicine packs for the animals, the first thing it says is, if you accidentally inject yourself with this, get yourself to a hospital immediately and take this leaflet with you. So I was like, it was only a tiny amount and I'm okay. And my boss was like, I'm really not happy about this. And I was like, I'm fine. It's okay. It was only a tiny bit. And I'd washed it out and everything because it did bleed quite heavily. And that's helpful because it helps flush out whatever it is you've injected yourself with. So that was fine. And about half an hour later, I started to get a really sore back. And within about 10 minutes of starting to feel the pain in my back, all the lower back muscles started to lock up. And I got scared. So that was another trip to the hospital, and they had to give me a sort of anti-serum type thing. And apparently I was very, very lucky because it can paralyse you. I did have the finger that I actually injected. Obviously it was sore because I'd poked myself in the finger with a dirty needle. But where the injection site was very swollen and very painful as well. But I didn't realise that because the pain in my back was worse and I was more worried about my back. But apparently you can lose limbs and things because of this stuff, because your body can't break it down. So the doctor told me that I was very, very lucky. And thankfully at the time I was quite close to the nearest hospital as well. He said if you'd waited maybe an hour longer, you know, you could have been in a wheelchair, or you could have lost your finger, or both. I was like, oh, that's great, thanks very much. So guys, I think the moral to this story is, unless you're like bulletproof, don't go into farming. Just don't work with animals. Oh dear. Okay, this flower's taken a little bit more work, just being slightly bigger, but now I'm just going to go in and I'm just blending the Scarlet Lake into the yellowed orange using my yellowed orange. Some people do use their lightest colour to go back over the entire area, kind of almost like as a blender pencil or to burnish. It's not something I'm in the habit of doing because when I lay down my colours, I lay them down to be to the stage that they're at, the shade and depth that I want them to be. And I find that going back over with a lighter pencil sometimes kind of mucks that up. So it's not something I'm in the habit of. I do it occasionally, but I tend to prefer just to use each pencil in each transition, so yellow into orange. And there's the flappy ears once again. You're going to get really used to that. If you subscribe to my channel and you watch my videos, you're going to hear a lot of that. That's my Jack Russell flapping her little ears when she wakes up. She's awake. Oh, and she's disappeared. She is quite old now. She's in retirement. She's 13. She's a very young 13. Hey, these are looking pretty good now. I'm quite happy with these. So let's move over to the other side now and let's do this one. Yeah, so a little Jack Russell. She spends most of her time at home in the house, just because she's getting on in years a little bit. She still goes out. She was originally intended for pest control, but also as a pet. And she's not quick enough now to catch things consistently. She'll still go and catch a few mice for you, and the occasional rat, and if she gets the chance she'll chase a rabbit, but she never catches them. She's not quick enough now, but she still enjoys it. So she's more a lady of leisure. She's come back. She's making a den now. She's rumbling about on the chair with a blanket. She's trying to sort herself into a comfortable position. She's funny. I don't even like Jack Russells. She came with my partner. That was part of the deal. If I took him, I took her as well. But she is not a typical terrier at all. She's not yappy or bad-tempered or territorial. She barks when someone comes to the door, and the minute that I let whoever it is across the threshold of the door, she stops because she realises that they are friend and not foe. So apart from that, all she wants to do is sit on your lap, get cuddles, preferably with a blanket over her. If you've got a blanket, you have got my dog on your lap. And that's pretty much all she wants. Sometimes she wants to play. She still likes to play with a ball. She'll go and fetch a ball and bring it back to you. But other than that, she just likes to sort of lounge about. If I make it to her age though, I would want to lounge about too. A lot. Probably still colouring and drawing pictures. So we're back to the mapping stage again, and I'm just working my way around. I know you can't really see my hands in the way, but I'm kind of in a strange position now. I'll try and move my hand back a bit. There we go. That's better. So again, I'm back to this sort of mapping stage, just looking to see where the red's sitting, try and get it as even as possible. That's something that I've tried to sort of mellow out on as I've gone along, is not fretting too much if things aren't absolutely perfect. If you look at flowers in nature, yes, they do have a pattern to them, but they are not always absolutely regimentally identical or symmetrical or whatever. They do have slight flaws, slight discrepancies, because that's just nature. So when I'm doing things like this, I try to bear that in mind as much as possible. Colouring for me is relaxation. So anything that I can do to minimise anxiety or stress attached to it is perfect. I refuse to get stressed about colouring a picture. I'm just going to have a quick sharpen here. Oh, my point hasn't snapped yet. I'm doing well. I'm just waiting for it to happen now that I've said that. It seems to me that adult colouring is quite an ironic pastime, because a lot of people do it for stress relief, to unwind, to relax, and yet the number of Facebook posts, Twitter posts, Instagram comments that I see, and people say, oh, I'm really stressed out because of X, Y, or Z with this colouring. I'm amazed by it. I'm like, guys, if it's stressing you out and giving you, you know, like anxiety and stuff, stop doing it. And I'm like, you're doing it wrong. It's just a piece of paper. That's all it is. It is not life-threatening. No one's going to die. So please don't, if you're getting stressed out about something or it's a little bit overwhelming, and I've experienced that myself. I've started a picture and thought, oh, I've bitten off way more than I can chew here. I'm not, you know, this is going to take me forever, and oh no, what am I going to do? Just stop. Just stop. Go and do something else. Do what I do, make a cup of tea. Tea fixes everything. That's not the aim of the game. Nothing about colouring should ever stress you out. Ever. But my best piece of advice for if you, like I was, if you have something that seems to be quite overwhelming, just pick a tiny little section and just work on that one section. Forget the rest of the picture. Forget what's going on. Just concentrate on a tiny little corner. Or like I'm doing here, I'm only concentrating on one flower. Although there's a few of them round the page, I'm only using 3 pencils. And I'm using the same 3 pencils. And I am using them in the same fashion. Now, it doesn't matter how big or fancy a piece of artwork or an illustration is. If you're only using 3 pencils, hey, we can do 3 pencils. I think it's really important to, you know, not to lose sight of that. And you do get really sucked into it sometimes. And, you know, you can get quite sort of obsessed with it. And, you know, it's very addictive. But try not to lose sight. If you are one of those people that, you know, it kind of biffs you out a little bit sometimes if you look at a picture and think, oh, wow, what am I going to do with this? Just don't. Tiny little piece at a time. The only pressure that is on you is the pressure that you put on yourself. And I am the messiah of that. I am my own worst enemy with so many things. And it's something that in more recent years I have tried to be a lot kinder to myself and stop putting as much pressure on myself and stop basically just bashing myself. And, you know, especially things like hobbies, like drawing and colouring. I mean, there's no reason for me to put pressure. It's all right to be ambitious, I am quite an ambitious person, and I'm a person that likes to learn things about anything. I'm a curious person. I like to know why. And so a hobby like this, a hobby like art in general, is brilliant because the learning never stops. There's always a new medium or a new technique or, you know, stuff like that. You're always learning. But that's what it is, you're learning. You're not... It would be different if you were in a high-powered job or you decided that you were going to take up art professionally. Then yeah, okay, you might put that pressure on yourself. But when it's a hobby, there is no need for it whatsoever. Just keep practicing and it'll come. But don't be scared to try things either. You guys know me by now. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. I'll try anything once. I'm not scared. That's one thing, you know, I'm sitting here sort of spouting advice and one thing and another, but I just want to say to you all, these videos and the things that I do, I want to share what I do and what I learn with people. These are not meant as instructional videos. If someone gets something helpful out of any of my videos, then that's amazing. That's, you know, that makes me really, really happy. But I get so much pleasure out of this, and I get so much satisfaction out of a finished image or illustration if I'm colouring, or, you know, out of a finished piece of work if I've done it myself. And, you know, and I want to share that with people, and that's why I do YouTube. That's why I like it. And as I say, even if it inspires someone to go and do something, you know, that to me, job done, great. And obviously it's good fun. I enjoy it as well. I'm having to concentrate here because I'm using the red pencil. Oh, sorry guys. Okay, I'm not so happy with this flower, and I think I'm going to grab a blender pencil. Here's one here. And I'm going to go around the individual petals and always start at the light. Oh, there we go. There's a little snap off at the end. Always start with the lightest colour, because you end up pulling your darkest colour through all your lovely blended bits already, and it can end up looking a little bit messy or muddy, and we don't want that. So I'm just going over my yellow into orange to start with, and then I'm going to pull this red down a little bit because the red is quite far out in this one. And again, I'm just going to work my way around. In between blends, if I just show you that, I don't know if you can see that or not, you can see the pigment on the end of my blender pencil. I've just got a scrap piece of paper over this side, and all I'm doing is turning the point on the paper to essentially scratch off the pigment so that the tip is nice and white again. The other thing I find, I only use the Prismacolor colourless blender. I just find it works well with most types of pencils. It does produce an awful lot of dust though, and you have to be quite careful to brush that off, because if you don't, you end up smooshing it in with your pencil into another area, perhaps where it is not wanted. So that's just a word of warning for you if you do decide to go down the colourless blender route with the Prismacolor. That's looking a bit better already, a bit happier. There we go. Eight down, 5 to go. Again, it's back to what I was just talking about with being relaxed and enjoying it. Yeah, I'm a slow colourist. I'm not going to hurry for anybody. So here we go, mapped out my orange and back with my red. Just give this a quick tickle. I do find with the red Prismacolors, they are so very, very pigmented, and I am literally just tickling the paper and no more. And the amount of colour that's laying down is just insane. If you did that with a polychromos or Crayola, you wouldn't see anything on the paper. A bit more orange down. Again, I'm sure you've got the formula by now. Now there we are again. I just said again. Stop saying again. The amount of pressure that I'm putting on this pencil is minimal. Absolutely minimal. You will find, I think I've talked about this before. I'm almost sure I've talked about this before. Colours like red the pigment seems to just lay down a lot easier and a lot better than blues, for example. I did talk about this before. I talked about this when I was colouring in Po Drugy Edge Stroney Snow. I talked about this because I had the same thing with the polychromos on the toothier paper, and I found that one colour seemed to go down a lot better, you know, on the tooth of the paper than another, and I started talking about differences in different types of pigments. In the Prismacolors, the reds in particular, they just slide on the paper. It's like butter. Which is, it's kind of nice because it requires like minimum effort from you, but you have to be super duper duper light-handed if you're wanting to blend and, you know, build some layers in and stuff. You have to really just like tickle the paper. Tickling room only. Okay, so let's get down to business now. Let's get some. Then I am now with this red pencil is like barely medium pressure. I am not pressing hard at all. I don't know what it is, but I'm seeming to find the smaller flowers a little bit easier. I don't know if that's strange or not. It feels kind of strange to me. You would think with a bigger surface area that I would find that easier. Clearly not. Alright, I'll see I've got another little diddly one here. Yay! That's funny. Bring on the diddly flowers. For anybody that has sat through this video up till this point, you're going to be dreaming of red, orange and yellow flowers in your sleep this evening. Again, I'm just tickling the paper. Tickle, tickle. Back with my orange. I'm kind of getting into a bit of a pattern now in using my, like what order I'm using the pencils in. Which, although it's good in terms of technique and consistency, is not good for me because, as I have mentioned before, I get bored really easily and I get bored using the same pencil, which is why I tend to jump about as much as I do rather than being methodical. But we don't have too many more flowers to go, so that'll be okay. If you guys, my viewers and subscribers, if you have a particular book that you would like to see me colour in, you can leave me a little comment down in the boxes below, and if it is a book that I have, I will surely consider it for the next Just Colouring videos. I'm always happy to oblige with things like this. I know sometimes it's just a curiosity to see what someone else would do with a page. I mean, that's why all of these you know, colouring community groups on social media, that's why they do so well, because we all have a natural curiosity to see, you know, what someone else would do with a page, or what colours they've picked, or that kind of thing. So if you would like to see me colour in something that you're maybe not sure of, or just out of nosiness, feel free to leave any suggestions. As I say, I'm really open to stuff like that, and obviously as well, this channel is very much yours as much as it is mine, because the content has to be liked by its viewers. So, you know, go on, be brave, leave me a comment, tell me what you'd like to see. Also as well, if I do get several requests for the same book, and it is a book that I do not have, if enough of you ask for it, I may well purchase it. I'm not a huge purchaser of colouring books. I don't have a huge amount. I mean, I've got plenty. I've got enough. I probably got enough books. If I was to sit and colour all day, every day, I dare say the number that I have is enough to take me into my old age, at least. You know, I'm not. There's no shortage, but I am not a collector of colouring books. I do know people that have maybe a little bit of a problem. I'm not mentioning any names. Not mentioning any names. But yeah, there's people that do have that, you know, that sort of collector streak in them when it comes to colouring books and colouring pencils as well. I'm just going back in with my blender now. I am not one of those people. However, I do like high quality colouring books that are slightly different also. So yeah, I'm open to that too. No, I am not, I don't like clutter, and I think it's probably to do with how I feel about things being organised and, you know, all that kind of stuff. I don't have a lot of junk in my house. That is partially due to the fact that for a stage of my life I did a lot of moving about, and constantly moving house, the less stuff you have to move, the cheaper, quicker and easier it becomes. So that might be partially to do with that. But I don't like a lot of, you know, I like to have clear surfaces and clear spaces. I don't like lots of trinkets and, you know, all that kind of stuff. I don't mind a few odds and ends, but I have a friend in particular who, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love her to bits. But when you go into her house, there is not one clear surface to even put like a tea mug down on or anything, and I actually find it quite stressful. I've never told her that, and thankfully she doesn't do art, and she doesn't colour or anything, so the chances of her seeing this are pretty slim. But I do find being in her house very, very stressful, and it's just, I just want to start like organising things and, you know, putting things in boxes and labelling things, and that sounds terrible, but that is something that I really, really struggle with. So I don't, you know, as a sort of byproduct of that, I don't keep a lot of things. I have a rule that if something hasn't been used in the last 12 months, it gets donated, sold or put in the bin, and that goes for clothes, shoes, whatever. It doesn't matter what it is, but that's pretty much my whole house. This is a calm, serene space, this building. You're not bringing all your junk in here, because about 98% of the time it never gets used and it sits and gathers dust, and it just annoys me. And I'm pretty much like that with everything. The exception to the rule is my book collection. I read a lot. Reading's probably one of my favourite pastimes, and I have a huge collection of books. Nobody touches my books. I have some that are worth a little bit of money, you know, some really old books. I have some first editions and things like that as well, and I have cheap paperbacks that just happen to be good stories. But I feel that the reading of books is something that's kind of getting a bit lost, you know, with the likes of Kindles and one thing and another. Although I did read not that long ago that actual physical books have made a comeback, and I think it was a bit like LPs at one point, you know, records. You know, the old vinyl's back in fashion now as well, which is quite nice. But being a writer and having had my work published, I understand the pain, the time and effort that goes into writing a story. I'm kind of precious of that. So, but I just love books. I am what is called a bibliophile. I like to smell books. I like the feel of them in my hand. I like ones with pretty spines and pretty covers. I like good stories. Even if a book doesn't have a good story, I'll still read it, and I will read it to the end. The only book that I have stopped reading, and it was about 3 paragraphs in, was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. I read a few lines of it and went, I am not reading this, and closed the book. And I have never touched a Harry Potter book since. I just couldn't put myself through it. Now that is no offence to anyone who likes the Harry Potter books. I love the films. I think the films are fabulous. I just couldn't read the books. And it's certainly no disrespect to Ms. Rowling. Again, I understand the process that you go through when you write a novel. Harry Potter books, just not for me. Nope, nope, nope. So, that is my stance on reading. But I have read some absolute stinkers. I've also read books that I have zero understanding of and had even less understanding of by the time I'd finished. And it's not a particularly nice feeling. But I didn't, I read not too long ago Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, and I don't know what happened. I actually found the book quite irritating. Obviously, for anyone who has read it, and for those of you who haven't, the main character is meant to be this sort of sulky, attitude-y type young man. And I have to commend the writer for conveying this beautifully, because his very presence in the story irritated me at one point. So, yeah, he did a good job with that there, but I was kind of just waiting for something to happen, and it never seemed to happen for me. And I got to the end and I was like, what was that all about? And I was really, I was quite disappointed actually, because I'd heard a lot about it. And I say I'm really open-minded with stuff like that, and I will read anything, you know, I will try to read anything at all. Obviously, like anything else, I have my preferences, and there's things that I would voluntarily pick over others, but I will, you know, if someone says to me, you know, this is something new, or this is different, you haven't tried this, go for it. I'll be like, yeah, of course I will, and I will read it all the way to the end. But yeah, I was kind of disappointed with Catcher in the Rye. I have just finished Emma by Jane Austen as well, and I was pre-warned about that. When it comes to classics, I like Dickens. I am willing to sit through the horrendously slow pace, but that was the style of the novels at the time. They were very long and drawn out, and if you make yourself aware when you read something like Dickens that you're going to have to wait until about chapter 72 before anything even remotely exciting happens, you know, if you've got the patience for that, you're good, because what I have found with Dickens is it is worth the wait. Emma, not so much. Not so much. It was a perfectly pleasant little story. Nothing particularly exciting happens in it, and I wasn't really kind of drawn in by the characters. You know, nobody really sort of, I didn't really warm to any of them. So that's another book, and I was kind of like, I did find it a bit of a chore getting myself through that. After I got about halfway and I'd really sort of got into the story and into the rhythm of the story, I realised that there really nothing much was going to happen, and I thought, okay, we just have to get through this. So yeah, not a fan, which was a shame, because I was really looking forward to that book too. But just, no, not for me, I'm afraid. Not for me. I'm trying to think of some really completely awful books that I've read, because there's not many things that I've read that are awful, and there's things that weren't to my taste, like I was just saying there with Emma and Catcher in the Rye. They just weren't for me, but they weren't written badly, they weren't bad books, and just not to my taste. I'm trying to think of something that was truly awful that I've read. Oh, I know. Everybody, I assume, will have heard of Nick Hornby. He wrote About a Boy, which was turned into a very successful film. He's written loads of stuff actually, and I don't mind his writing. Unfortunately for me, the first book of his that I read was probably his worst book, and he might even be willing to admit that openly, I don't know. Mr. Nick Hornby, if this ever reaches you, please let me know and put me out of my misery. The first book I read of his was called Slam, and it was about a teenage boy who had a skateboard, and it was truly awful. There was no storyline. Yeah, if you happen to read that book or come across it, put it down. Just put it down and go and pick up About a Boy or any one of Nick Hornby's other really good books. Alright, boys and girls, on to the final flower. We'll have a look at the fruits of our labour. See, I'm getting really blasé now. I'm just like, yeah, let's just scribble down some of this yellow. Let's just scribble down some of this orange. And I have my Scarlet Lake. Again, just making sure that I'm keeping my pressure nice and light. Again, you can see that my hand's quite far up my pencil, and that's to aid in keeping the pressure nice and light. I don't want it to end up going in too hard and too dark to begin with. I'll have a little go in with my yellow. Good old canary yellow. Although green is my favourite colour, and I do like most shades of green, I have to say that yellow, and particularly this shade of yellow, comes a close second, and it actually stems from my childhood. My father's favourite colour is yellow, and he used to have a van. He runs his own business, and his first proper commercial vehicle that he bought was a yellow van, and I spent a lot of my childhood when I was very, very young, and interestingly I spent a lot of that time colouring as well. I spent a lot of my time in that vehicle with my dad, with my mum and dad being self-employed. I used to go out to work with my dad before I started, you know, before I was old enough to start school. I was only in nursery or kindergarten, whatever you want to call it, 1 day a week, and that was a Monday, and the rest of the time was split between staying a day with my grandparents, and I had 2 sets of grandparents at that point, in the van with my dad, and some days I'd be in the office with my mum. So I have this sort of affinity with the colour yellow, and everyone knew my dad's van because it was yellow. You know, everybody knew who he was, and everybody always waved to him. It's like, oh, there he is in his yellow van. And I think because of that, when dad grew very emotionally attached to that van, and he had it for a long number of years, and I suppose it was part of the success of his business, you know, when he first started his business up all those years ago. So he likes yellow things too, and I think that's where it comes from with me as well, because it reminds me of quite a happy part of my childhood. That was back in the dark ages, when you used to be able to leave your kids in a car, and Dad would go in and see customers, and he would leave me out in the van, usually with something to drink and a colouring book, or at the very least pad and paper so that I could draw. So yellow invokes, you know, quite happy memories for me, and it is quite a cheery colour, and generally speaking I am quite a cheery person. I think my fiancé might say differently sometimes, but generally I have quite a sunny disposition, and I think that's probably part of the, you know, part of it all as well. So I like yellow. Yellow's a good colour. I wouldn't wear yellow, I don't think. I would wear green all day long, but yellow, I think you have to be... It would depend on the garment or the accessory, I suppose. But you know, there's certain people that maybe carry off yellow slightly better than others, and I may not be one of those people. Although I'm very fortunate with my colouring, having dark hair, and although my skin is quite pale in the winter due to my Italian lineage, I do go very, very brown in the summer, and it's something that people always comment on. You know, there'll be a few weeks maybe into May when there's been a tiny bit of sunshine, and people will start saying to me, oh, have you been on holiday? Have you been abroad? And I'm like, no, I've just stood outside for 10 minutes. I seem to have this sort of schizophrenic skin tone where I go from being absolutely deathly white in the winter, which I'm convinced is just the Scottish part of me, and then in the summer going really, really dark, and my Italianness just sort of takes over like a, you know, like a split personality, like a Jekyll and Hyde. But because of my colouring, I tend to get away with wearing most colours, and I know that for some people that's really, you know, a difficult thing to deal with. But my best friend is blonde, and she is very, very pale skinned, and she has to be very, very careful of what she chooses to wear when it comes to the colour of her clothes, because certain colours just make her look really pale and washed out, you know, they make her look sick, and it's just because her skin is so pale. She has amazing skin, she looks like she's got the skin of like a 15-year-old girl. It's absolutely flawless. There's not a wrinkle or line on her face anywhere. She has no blemishes. She is very, very blessed with her skin tone, but unfortunately when it comes to clothes, it's a bit of a disadvantage for her. She was really worried about our wedding because she is my bridesmaid, and she was worried about what the colour scheme choices were, because she didn't want to end up in, you know, like a bright red dress or something that was going to make her look really, really pale and washed out next to me. But of course my wedding colour, in inverted commas, is green, and it's a pale sage green, which my friend is absolutely overjoyed about because it's a nice pastel shade that she can wear. Okay, so I am done with this final flower. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit, and there we have it. How is that? Yeah, I'm really pleased with those. They're really bright and vibrant, and that's exactly the kind of look that I was going for and what I wanted. I hope you've enjoyed having this on in the background and listening to me wittering away as usual. Up in this corner there is a poll that I would really appreciate if you took a few minutes just to click on and answer the question there. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, that would be awesome. And if you haven't subscribed already, please feel free to do so. I do have a variety of videos and I'm uploading content twice a week, so surely there'll be something to suit you, whether it's colouring or whether it's more art and sketching, that kind of thing. There's plenty of variety in the videos and I have plenty more in store. Thank you once again for joining me here in the Colour Cave, and I hope you guys have a good day. We'll see you next time. Bye guys.